While we're bringing the presentation up on the screen, let me introduce Antonio. I have the same problem I had with Mario. There's a huge curriculum vitae here. We're going to be talking about sexualizing functional diversity to politicize it. Antonio is a member of the Independent and Freedom Forum, and he's been a member since 2004. He participated in various groups to discuss these issues on the political level, particularly in Catalonia. He's been active in the independent living movement in Barcelona, and he has concentrated his efforts more and more in cultural audiovisual projects. And he's worked on a program that has to do with four-leaf clovers. He's worked with actors, and he's been an actor. And so he was a co-director of very important works, and among them Nexos. And he's been a scriptwriter, a screenwriter, and actor as well. And so he's done many other things, but I really am out of time. And I've tried to zero in on those things that really were related to what he's going to be talking about today. So please stick to also, Antonio, to the 40 minutes. Thank you, Lola. I'd like to thank all our colleagues who worked so hard to bring us here together. I think it's very important to see everybody here today. And I think maybe other places, Susana Diaz, who is the regional government of Andalusia, when she's out negotiating things, she knows who everybody is, and I think it's important for us to do it as well. As Juanjo just said, we talk about independent living and transforming society, then this only makes sense if we are realistic, if we look at the whole picture and we see how our lives and our functional diversity really fits into our surroundings, our environment, and how we can actually transform our environment. And if we don't transform it, instead of transforming our environment, what we're doing is patching things up, a little patch here and a little patch there. As Laura was saying, that over the time I've been an activist, I have developed as a person, and when I was asked to talk about the figure of the personal assistant as a human right, I don't have to justify myself very much. But when I talk about sexuality, I have to explain why this is so important in a Congress, say, on independent living. Let me begin then by saying, let me begin by describing my view of this system that we've been saying that we need to transform in order for us to live more fulfilling lives. Functional diversity and discrimination against me because of my functional diversity, this has to do with the fact that our system is based on production. And when we talk about those capacities, the things we're able to do, now we've never asked on one of those questionnaires to find out if we're really a person with disability. They never ask you, are you funny? Are you well-loved? Do you love other people? Nobody cares about that. So in other words, we're considered as something completely disconnected from society. And obviously, if you're disconnected from society, that's your own personal problem. So those capacities, those functions that are associated with productivity, what they're trying to do is make sure that we have the production unit that each and every one of us has become. But apart from producing, then we need to reproduce as well. We need to reproduce the working force. We need to reproduce the mass consumer. Hence, sexuality and sexism. That's when they come into the picture. and today and tomorrow, and whenever we talk about independent living, we have to explain how bad institutions are. We don't want to be locked up in institutions, and that's obviously how we all feel. However, reality is that if the model of independent living only had to compete against institutions, well, it would be easy, quote unquote, to make people understand that independent living was a better system for, among other reasons, for economic. The economic perspective is more, quote unquote, efficient. However, but the way that the system is sustained is not through the institutions, no matter how bad they are, but through families, in fact. That's what sustains the system, and the women of our families. And we're talking about fighting against that type of slavery because the administration has the feeling that this work is free of charge. And the lives of these people are simply to be devoted towards providing this care that the state isn't preparing. And so there's no value placed on the work that they do. So, as we advance along the idea and putting into practice independent living to combat the idea of productionism as the driving force behind society, if we don't bring into the equation this compulsory need for reproduction and the fact that women are going to be taking care of us within families, if we don't do that, it's going to be impossible to change the social environment in which we are living. So if we're working against ableism, then that's going to help fight sexism as well, and everything that we are doing to try to promote equality between the genders is also going to help provide equality in the sense, or in the field of ableism. So having said that, then I can justify what I'm doing here today. But just in case you need a further explanation, I'm used to giving explanations. When I was listening to Mario just now, when he was talking about the people forgotten by the social system, and one of those situations that really has been forgotten by our social system, then it's something I'm going to talk about right now. And one of those things that we've forgotten is our bodies. And so we take that basic step forward. We say, now the person isn't the problem, now it's the environment that's the problem, that provides us some alleviation. So let's completely forget about those people. But what we leave behind in this focus, not only our bodies are not the problem, our bodies are in fact the solution. Right? We have no solution. There is no solution that isn't based on our bodies. So it doesn't matter having a completely accessible environment, and we have personal assistants accompanying us to a museum or to a bar. Now, why would we want all those things if nobody wants to talk to us? So that's not going to change by passing a new law. Those things need to change through other means. And that's where culture is so important. Culture is so important, as I say, because not only does culture describe what reality is when you look at a film, you look at a documentary, and you're not necessarily describing something that's out there in an objective and neutral way. No, what you're doing is creating reality for the immense majority of people who haven't had that particular experience in that particular part of the world that you're focusing on. In this country, for example, the film that has gotten the most number of prizes is Mar Adentro. Do you remember that movie? And so this creates reality. It was a film about a person with a disability. So when we're hidden in our family homes without any kind of support, we don't get out and mingle with the rest of our community. For the vast majority of people who have no daily contact with functional diversity, this film, Mar Adentro, The Untouchable, and a couple more films that come to mind, which they're all horrible films that talk about stereotypes of people with functional diversity.
Bueno, no quiero entrar, porque sí que da para mucho
Don't get me started, please, on cinema.
Que hay un rato también. Entonces, mejor no entro.
So I'm going to refrain from keep talking about cinema. But what these films are not describing reality. And for the vast majority of people, this is the only glimpse they get of a certain reality. So I want to talk about how we build that image of sexuality, because sexuality has to do with our link to other people, and we had to break through those infantile dynamics we're used to.
Esas cosas no se cambian con una ley, ¿no?
As I say, these things can't be changed by passing a law. This is something that happened in 2006. We talked about, or we passed a law about personal autonomy, and then we have an international document that recognizes our right to independent life and the obligation of the state to help us achieve it. In 2012, when we started doing the types of things I'm going to be talking about, we realized we had passed new laws, but our lives were going along just as they had, and we had to move forward. That's when we said this cannot go on like this. And so, non-written laws, our vision of reality is much more important than that. Our vision of how to use the laws then is what hadn't changed. People still are paternalistic towards us. They still think we're children. They still treat us as though our bodies aren't ours. Your body is being touched by people that you haven't authorized to touch you. This is a kind of violence against you day after day, where you don't choose who's working for you, and you don't even choose what you eat, etc. Now, this lifestyle was supposed to be the solution to something. So that was the solution. What was the problem, and who had the problem? So these types of answers are only possible if we are ultra-protectionists who see us as the everlasting children, and that seems to perpetuate this situation. And sexuality is a very strong tool to bring down that paternalistic vision which keeps us in the childlike position.
Dentro de esa idea de la necesidad, ¿no? El título de la ponencia de hoy era
the fact that the title of my lecture is to sexualize functional diversity, to politicize it in this sense.
Politizarla en el sentido de que,
as I'm saying, in the sense that whilst we're looked at as children, the answers are always answers to personal problems. One doesn't understand that this might be a problem of the entire community. So if we can change these ideas and situations of dependence, and we're looked at that as children, but we're and so people think that you're children and you obviously are dependent. So if we can change this idea that represents us as children, then we can also show that it isn't natural for us to be dependent upon others to live. And so here it's how everything depends upon how the community is organized. So I shall try to explain, if we have time, that is, the proposal of the sexual assistant as an important tool in this process to sexualize functional diversity. And I don't think it would be terrible for it to be understood as that sexuality is to use sexual assistance. the same as people with functional diversity. They don't not to use personal assistance. These are tools, these are supports to develop our lives. This is a powerful tool, and later we'll explain the proposal and why, but it's not the way to live. Sexuality is an important tool. To understand the proposal that we shall have and how this should be, we must understand that there are different ways to look at this. Sometimes it's very clear when you explain that if you go around an electric wheelchair, that chair is not taking you for a walk around the city. You go around the city the way you wish. You make your decisions about where you're going to go, how fast you want to go, how slow you want to go, and the chair moves. But even though the chair moves, you determine the speed and where you want to go. So you make your decisions upon that given action. So most people accept that the chair doesn't take us for a walk around the city, but we are using the chair to move about. And so support, instead of being technological, it's a human support, then it's more difficult to respect that the independence and autonomy of certain people is to do things with that support, but it doesn't mean that it's the other person that is giving that support and you're the object of the intervention, but you're still the subject making decisions about what you do with the support you need. So this photograph here, you can't see it very well, but it's here. You can see this action of drinking wine out of that bag. When I drink wine out of a bag, what I'm trying to say is that my assistant is not helping me drink. I am drinking the way I want through the hands of my assistant, because I am the one who makes the decision, and the support to make that possible comes from my personal assistant. And in the same way, when we speak about sexual assistance as a support to exceed to one's body sexually speaking, and in other words, this means that to explore your body, to know how it works, what we like, what we don't like, to be able to give pleasure with masturbation, then the proposal we make is that it's an instrumental support. It's not therapeutic. This is an instrumental support as a wheelchair is or as a personal assistant is. And so sexual assistant turns out to be your hands to do things that you want to do. That person isn't exploring your body. You're exploring your body the way you want to with that support, which would be the hands of your assistant. This is a decision-making issue here. We have to decide if this is possible or if this is not possible. There are people who deny that. People with functional disability, they say that they can't say that we can't have an independent life because there's a restriction explained by Mario, and the only way to consider independence or autonomy is by doing things without counting on other people, but this is only accepted as a type of independence. So this is a decision that we need to take on board. People deny the fact that we who do things like this can be autonomous. The way we are autonomous is not considered autonomy, but because there's only one way to be autonomous. It's not an absolute truth, but decisions need to be made and to see how we see things. Also, I'm speaking about decision-making, and as I'm sitting in a wheelchair, and with independent living, and originally thrust by people with a physical functional problem, where we speak about people with an intellectual functional diversity. And this is only an apparent forgetfulness because we're not explicit. When I'm speaking about decision-making, each person makes one's own decisions, and there are different ways to make decisions. And with intellectual disability, there are things that people can say themselves. Sometimes people need support to say things. They need support with decision-making, and other things cannot be determined and need to be interpreted as best as possible. This is more complex. Seems like a third person must guarantee that link with the assistant so that it works correctly. And so this is a more complex decision-making system, but it is valuable, and we must organize us socially that this be possible. So when I speak about decision-making, you must always understand that each person does the decision-making as best one can. And also to understand the proposal for a sexual assistant, one must differentiate between different types of services. If we have learned something in the independent living movement, any service, a general service for the entire population, transportation or education, services which frequently they exclude, and with something that excludes, we need to have a special service. And so here, this seemed to be part of the solution, because in one way or another one can break away from exclusion, but at mid and long term, this is just part of the problem. We remember special education with residences and the like. And so here what works better is this service which is more general for the entire population, and we need to make this inclusive instead of restrictive or exclusionary. These are different ways to work, because it will guarantee the rights of those minorities, but also this will be better for the group, the population in general. Accessible transport is not that it just be transportation that allows these minorities to go up on the bus, but the majority is bothered because they're more uncomfortable. No, but this is better, more comfortable, safer transportation for the group, the population in general. The same for education. When it's inclusive, there are better teaching tools for all of the students, not just for people with functional diversity. So the difference when one addresses this from inclusion and not from generalizing special service, then it becomes a social change that profits the entire community. It benefits the entire community. So then there are general services and special services. There are specific services. Personal assistance. Not everybody. Personal assistance is for everybody. This is for those people who need a personal assistant because they need the support of another person, of that personal assistant. This is not something for the entire population, but only and specifically for the certain ways that the body needs to work. So when we speak about sexual service, this would clearly be a service, a specific service, with sexual assistance as a support to accede to one's own body sexually. This has to do with specificity of the way certain people's bodies work. This isn't any type of sexual service for the population in general. No, this is a specific service that has to do with the way a person does things. So there are different proposals here. To explain the proposal for sexual assistance, we can focus this on 4 basic issues. Firstly, the definition of sexual assistance and what the proposal is. The proposal is that it is to be sexual work. I'd like to explain this because there's a big social debate about this, and it's a burning issue when we speak about sexual work. Our proposal for sexual assistance is a type of sexual work. It is any work where there's an exchange of pleasure, excitation, in exchange for money. And each one has its own framework. It's not a striptease isn't the same as prostitution service, as pornography, or sexual assistance. They're all it's all sexual work, but each has its own framework. We must understand that framework, not for a moral hierarchy about what is better or worse. But this is a practical issue that the person who works, or the person who receives the service, knows very clearly what one can expect and what one might not expect. So someone who goes to see a striptease knows that it makes no sense to wait for there to be a coitus. A striptease is for certain things. So here we try to clarify what can we expect from a sexual assistant? What do we expect and what should we not expect from this type of service? In a nutshell, this proposal is it to be a support to have access to one's own body, not to have access to other bodies. This is another type of sexual service which are general for the entire population. Prostitution, for example, or an erotic massage. These are sexual services targeted to the entire population. He who is interested in working with this type of service. And what we have learned is that the best thing is for those services which are general services to make them inclusive, not to have special services for special people besides creating a ghetto. No, this doesn't work. But you don't need to turn this into a problem. From the beginning, we should know what the political strategy is. So the proposal is to accede to one's own body, or have access to one's own body. What would the task for the sexual assistant be? And so basically, one can explore one's own body, to be familiar with one's own body, to masturbate oneself. And this is more usual when the two people want to have sex. They need support for a certain type of position or certain movements. And so here we would need a sexual assistant for these practices. But the assistant is never someone with whom we have sexual practice. It's just we do it with ourselves or with other people. For whom would this sexual assistant be? For those people where their type of autonomy consists of doing things with the aid of another person. And who might be a sexual assistant? Well, anyone. And then we have training when we speak about sexual assistance. The most important thing is for us not to say that knowledge about our bodies and our lives, everything belongs to other people, that they are the decision makers. I'm sure that almost nobody learns how to masturbate oneself during a course. People should learn how to do these things by playing, experimenting with one's own body, to find one's own way to experiment this part of one's life. So we must also have that opportunity to be able to learn the same way. And not that someone say what things are because they've been trained in this. No, somebody who is an aid, a support, so that we can have access to our own bodies and to develop and take our lives on board, just like anybody else. So with this approach, for about a year and a half now, we set up a project that Laura explained before. My hands are your hands. It's and this is the website, asistentesexual.org. And so this project is, well, many people are interested in this. There are difficulties, too, with this. But the interest is shown. And that this year and a half, there have been 1 million pages have been visited, 250 hits. And Facebook, we have 2,000 followers, and we have 200 assistants. They've been announced themselves on the web. We have 100 subscribers to the precisely, we have them interested in our newsletter, 100 subscribers to our newsletter, so we can explain the specific proposal of our, and it's one can have access to one's own body, and we have the practical part, which is to facilitate and being able to get in touch with people who need these types of support and aid, and people who want to give this type of support. All of this is free.
Bueno, ya para respetar los 10 minutos y para que tengamos tiempo de poder hablar, había traído unos cuantos esquemas, pero no los voy a pasar, los puedes encontrar en internet.
You can find them on the internet.
Para intentar poner en relación la asistencia sexual con otras
put
figuras del
the
trabajo sexual.
sexual assistant with others. I'm interested in having a framework, because I want this framework to work as best as possible, but not to establish any type of moral hierarchy. No. First question which always arises. What difference is between this and prostitution? The problem for me isn't the question. The problem is, why are we so concerned about that? I think there's a problem, and we need to make sure that this isn't prostitution. We need to understand this and I think this is sad. So here's the graph. I don't know if you can read it. I'll put another one up here. The letters are bigger. Or else you can, it's all in the internet. Just to show you different figures. This isn't to establish a hierarchy about importance or morality or anything like that. So here, I'm trying to have two axes which give important information about what sexual assistance is all about, to differentiate between the sexual work that we're speaking about is access to one's own body or access to other bodies. For me, this is an important division. Sexual assistant with whom you have sex, or someone who helps you to have sex with your own self or with someone else. The sexual assistant helps with one's access to one's own body, and prostitution is access to another one's body. And there's a project in Japan called White Hands. White Hands. Called White Hands. And what they do, aided ejaculation, because they only take care of men, and women take care of the men. I haven't finished, eh? And besides, not only there's only women who take care of the men, but these women have medical training or in healthcare training. They call this assisted ejaculation because this is a medical action, and the other axis is the axis that we're talking about, a job or a volunteership. This is important because when we speak about sexual assistance, that it be for one to accede to one's body is a right. It's a right as the same as a personal assistant. That our bodies be ours is absolutely indispensable so that our lives be ours. If this is a right, then the rights, and the only way to guarantee them in our system, in our social system, is that this support to guarantee that right be covered as a job. If our rights depend on someone's goodwill, well, this is not a right. That's something else. So sexual assistance would be situated in the field of access to be able to access one's own body. And then intimate and erotic accompaniment. This arose in Barcelona some years ago.
Se mueve más hacia el terreno del
voluntariado. This is more volunteer. One can pay with poems, exchanges. It's more flexible.
En cambio, por ejemplo, la prostitución
and then prostitution is a job.
Pues lo de los poemas, pues no.
And so, but poems, no, it's not. That's not the situation. So. These things are important in order to have a very clear framework, because if not for the worker or the person who receives the support and the aid, things might be frustrating and confusing when one has expectations which don't correspond to the aid you need. So with sexuality, we see that finally there is someone to aid. It seems like a magic wand, which will resolve the problem of total exclusion, which has been hitting us for centuries, but it's not the case. It's a basic, essential tool to break down that barrier of access to one's own body, and so we need to speak about sexuality with our own bodies, and we want to have a healthy relationship with other bodies. This is a very important tool, but it is not a magic wand. We cannot wait that for our wishes and our desires be resolved with this support called sexual assistance. The same as a personal assistant is not going to resolve the isolation of people with functional diversity. This is just something that your body be yours, your actions be yours, but that person won't be your friend. You find your friends elsewhere. That sexual assistance is what it is, not your friend. With sexual assistance, the same thing. We very clear about everything. We don't want anyone to expect what one should not expect what one should not, but we know what we can expect, that it's a person's right. It's well determined. It is a right. Sexual assistance is a right. And I know this is small letters. It's hard to read, but this just shows different areas, different figures, things that are different, for example, so that each person may look at this. You can find this on the internet. It's impossible to read this. And I'm sorry that it's so small. Thank you.